The factory air clung to Holden's clothes like a second skin as he pushed open the door to Westbrook Orthodontics. His shoulders ached from 12 hours of standing at the line, but he straightened them anyway. The receptionist glanced up, recognition softening her features. "Mr. Reese, right on time as always." Holden nodded, digging into his back pocket for his worn leather wallet. Payday came through. He counted out 6 crisp $100 bills, placing them on the counter with calloused fingers. That should cover this month's payment. The receptionist, Donna, according to her name tag, typed the payment into the system. "That brings you to just over halfway paid on Zane's treatment." She slid a receipt across the counter. "Dr. Westbrook says he's making excellent progress." "Good to hear." Holden allowed himself a small smile. "Kid deserves straight teeth even if he won't thank me for them." Donna looked up, sympathy crossing her face. "Teenagers, right? My 14-year-old acts like I'm personally responsible for ruining her life every morning." "Something like that." Holden pocketed the receipt. "Have a good day." "You too, Mr. Reese. Get some rest. You look tired." Holden nodded, not bothering to explain that rest wasn't on today's agenda. He pushed open the glass door, stepping back into the October chill. 2 doors down through the window of the walk-in clinic, Rosa Linney caught his eye. She raised a hand in greeting, her smile genuine, unlike so many others in this town. Holden lifted his chin in acknowledgement but kept walking, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably Rosa checking in as she did every few weeks. They'd known each other since high school, back when Holden had possibilities ahead of him before the factory became his life. He didn't check the message. What was the point? His reality wouldn't change by reading it. The drive home took 18 minutes. Holden counted each one, savoring the quiet of his truck cabin. No demands, no disappointment. Just the rumble of tires on asphalt and the occasional static from his ancient radio. But he pulled into the driveway of the 2-story home he'd spent the last 5 years paying for. Not bad on the outside. Fresh paint, decent lawn. Inside was a different story altogether. Inside, he was a stranger who paid the bills. Holden sat for a moment, letting the engine idle, fingers tight around the steering wheel. A single light burned in the kitchen window. Marla would be waiting, ready with some petty complaint or cold remark. And Zane, the kid he'd try to raise as his own, would look through him like he was made of glass. He killed the engine. At least he'd paid for the braces today. One less burden on his mind. Holden pushed open the door. Paper bag of takeout clutched in one hand. The smell of burgers and fries wafted through the house. "Dinner," he called out, setting the food on the kitchen counter. He heard the telltale sound of video game gunfire pausing upstairs. "You're late." Marla stepped into the kitchen. Arms folded across her chest. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour. Her nails freshly manicured. She looked at the takeout bags with thinly veiled disgust. "Fast food again. I just wore 12 hours, Marla." Holden kept his voice steady, unwilling to give her the reaction she wanted. "Didn't have time to stop at the grocery store. You could have called. I would have picked something up." Her tone suggested he'd personally insulted her by bringing home food. "With what money?" "The money I haven't given you yet." You pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. Too tired to stand on aching feet any longer. That Marla's mouth tightened. "Don't start with that again. You know how tight things have been tight because she'd spent $300 on a purse last week." But Holden didn't mention that. "Where's Zane coming?" She opened a bag. Nose wrinkling. "Did you at least remember his onion rings? You know he doesn't eat fries." "Yes, I remembered." Holden pulled out 3 wrapped burgers in a separate container of onion rings. Footsteps thundered down the stairs and Zane appeared in the doorway. At 16, he'd shot up in height, towering over his mother and nearly matching Holden. His dark hair hung in his eyes, and the sullen set of his mouth matched his mother's onion rings. He asked, not looking at Holden in the bag. Holden pushed it toward him. Zane grabbed the food and his burger, turning to leave. "Sit with us." Marla said, "Family dinner." The boy rolled his eyes but dropped into a chair, immediately pulling out his phone. The 3 of them sat in silence for a moment, unwrapping food. "I paid for your braces today," Holden said, trying to find neutral ground. "Doctor says you're making good progress." Zane didn't look up from his phone. "Whatever. You could say thank you," Holden suggested, his patience wearing thin after the long shift. "For what? Mom's insurance covers most of it anyway." "No, it doesn't," Holden said evenly. "Your orthodontist doesn't take our insurance. I'm paying out of pocket." $600 a month. So what? You want a medal? Zane finally looked up, eyes flashing with teenage contempt. Nobody asked you to do that. I'm your stepfather. That's what family does. Zane's laugh was cold. Family? You're just some guy my mom married. We're not family. Zane, Marla said, but her rebuke lacked conviction. What? It's true. The boy stood up, grabbing his food. I'm eating in my room. Sit down and finish your dinner. Holden said, his voice firm but not raised. You don't tell me what to do. Zane snatched up his food. You're just some pathetic guy my mom settled for. You'll never be my dad. The slam of the car door as they pulled into the driveway earlier replayed in Holden's mind. Same attitude. Same words. Holden looked at Marla, waiting for her to say something to defend him, to discipline her son, but she just sat there. The corner of her mouth quirked in what might have been a suppressed smile. You want to say something? He asked her. She shrugged. He's just saying what we're all thinking. The words hung in the air between them. Holden felt something in his chest hardened. He'd suspected for a long time that this was how she felt. But hearing it stated so plainly still cut deep. Is that so? He kept his voice neutral, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of seeing him hurt. Oh, don't look so wounded. Marla wadded up her burger wrapper. You knew what this was when you married me. A convenient arrangement. You got a ready-made family. And I got financial stability. Except I thought you actually care about me. I do in my way. Her smile never reached her eyes. But let's not pretend this was some great love story. Holden stood up. Appetite gone. I'm going to shower. Typical. She muttered. Walk away when things get uncomfortable. He turned back. What exactly do you want from me, Marla? I work nights to pay for this house, for Zane's braces, for your shopping sprees. I cook, I clean, I fix what breaks. What else should I be doing? Being a man would be a start. She met his eyes coldly. Standing up for yourself. Instead of slinking around like some beaten dog. It's pathetic. Later that night, as Holden tried to sleep beside her, Marla turned to him in the darkness. Her perfume, too strong and expensive, made his head ache. You're lucky I even married you. She whispered, voice venomous. Men like you don't get women like me. Holden said nothing. Just rolled over and got up. He took his pillow and a spare blanket from the closet. As he settled onto the living room couch, he heard laughter from upstairs, Marla's voice. Then Zane's mocking him, sharing the joke at his expense. He stared at the ceiling, sleep a distant possibility. You look like hell, Reese. Jed dropped his lunchbox onto the bench beside Holden. The factory break room hummed with tired voices and the gurgle of the ancient coffee maker. Holden rubbed his eyes. The fluorescent lights making his headache worse. Didn't sleep much. Jed studied him. The lines around his eyes deepening. In his 50s, with iron gray hair cut military short, Jed Ackers had the weathered look of a man who'd seen too much. Trouble at home again? Holden glanced around, lowering his voice. It's nothing. Bull. Jed unwrapped his sandwich. Known you 5 years now. You're not yourself lately. Just tired from working double shifts to pay for that ungrateful kid's dental work. Jed took a bite, talking around it. You ever think maybe you're killing yourself for people who wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire? Holden almost smiled at the crude assessment. They're family. Family. Jed snorted. That boy treats you like dirt scraped off his shoe, and that wife of yours. He stopped himself. Not my business. But you deserve better. Holden stared into his coffee. The bitter dregs reflecting the overhead lights. For the first time, he found himself wanting to talk about it, to let someone else see the cracks forming in his carefully constructed life. She told me I was lucky she married me. Jed stopped chewing. She what? Last night. Said men like me don't get women like her. Holden's jaw tightened. Like she did me some favor. Jesus, Holden. Jed set down his sandwich. Why do you stay? You don't have kids together. The boy treats you like garbage. What keeping you there? I made a commitment. The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. To what? Being someone's doormat. Jed shook his head. The Holden Reese I met 5 years ago, the one who wouldn't take shit from the floor manager who organized that safety walkout. That guy wouldn't let anybody treat him this way. That guy didn't have a mortgage and a stepson's medical bills. That guy had self-respect. Jed's voice softened. Some men lose themselves trying to save what's already ashes. Maybe it's time you let it burn. Holden looked up. The words hitting him with unexpected force. Let burn. Walk away. Start over. Jed shrugged. What's the worst that happens? You lose people who don't appreciate you anyway. The break room door swung open and their supervisor called out breaks over in 2. Jed gathered his trash, clapping Holden on the shoulder. Think about it is all I'm saying. Life's too short to waste it on people who think you're beneath them. Holden nodded. The seed of an idea beginning to take root. 3 days later. Holden pulled into the driveway just as dawn was breaking. The night shift had run 2 hours overdue to equipment malfunctions and exhaustion sat heavy in his bones. He called Marla to tell her he'd be late, but she hadn't answered. Typical. The house was quiet as he inserted his key in the lock. Zane would be asleep for another hour before school. Marla might be up getting ready for a part-time job at the boutique downtown, a job that paid her spending money while Holden's salary covered the real bills. That he stepped inside, immediately registering 2 things. Marla's voice coming from the kitchen and the smell of fresh coffee. She was on the phone. Her voice animated in a way it never was with him. I know, right? Her laugh tinkled fake in practice. It's like living with a walking ATM, except the ATM is depressing to look at. Holden froze in the hallway. Grace, you don't even know. Marla continued, unaware of his presence. Last night, he actually tried to talk about our relationship. Like there's anything to discuss. I married him because Clyde was a flake and I needed stability for Zane. His sister-in-law's voice murmured something from the phone. Useful but pathetic, Marla agreed. At least he works nights, so I don't have to see him much. I just need him to keep paying for things until I figure out something better. Holden's hands curled into fists at his sides, his chest tight with a cold, clarifying anger. No, Zane sees right through him. Marla laughed again. Smart kid, knows this guy isn't worth respecting. I think deep down Holden knows it too. Quietly, Holden backed away from the kitchen doorway. He retreated to the front door, opened it, and then closed it loudly enough for her to hear. Marla, he called out as if just arriving. I'm home. The phone conversation cut off abruptly. By the time he entered the kitchen, Marla was putting her phone down. Her expression rearranged into the neutral mask she wore around him. You're late, she said. Holden looked at her, really looked at her. The calculated tilt of her head, the emptiness behind her eyes, the slight curl of contempt at the corner of her mouth. How had he never seen it clearly before? Equipment breakdown, he said flatly. Had to stay to fix it? Well, Zane needs to ride to school today. My car is making that noise again. Holden nodded, not trusting himself to speak further. Something had shifted inside him. As if a light had been turned on in a dark room. He saw everything clearly now, saw her clearly. The illusion he'd been living under shattered completely. I'll take him, he said, turning away. I need a shower first. As he climbed the stairs, he felt oddly calm. The hurt and betrayal were there, burning beneath the surface. But something else was emerging, something cold and decisive. If she wanted to use him to mock him behind his back, to treat his devotion as a joke, fine. But the game was about to change. I end the shower as hot water pounded against his back. Holden made a decision. He wouldn't explode, wouldn't give her the satisfaction of an emotional reaction. Instead, he would plan. He would be patient. And when the time was right, he would walk away, but not before ensuring that Marla and Zane understood exactly what they were losing. Let it burn, Jed had said. Yes, but on his terms, not hers. Rosa's face lit up when Holden walked into the clinic. While look what the cat dragged in, her smile faded as she took in his expression. What's wrong? Can we talk? Holden kept his voice low. Privately, Rosa glanced at the reception desk, then nodded. My break's in 10 minutes. Meet me at the coffee shop next door. Exactly 10 minutes later, Holden sat across from Rosa in a corner booth at Gina's cafe. The lunch crowd hadn't arrived yet, giving them relative privacy. Okay, spill it. Rosa wrapped her hand around her coffee mug. You look terrible and you've been ignoring my texts for weeks. I need your help. Holden said, getting straight to the point. Rosa's eyebrows rose. That's new. You never asked for help. Things changed. He took a breath. I'm planning to leave Marla. Rosa's expression shifted from surprise to something more complex, relief mixed with concern. What happened? Holden told her everything. Zane's outburst. Marla's cruel words, the phone conversation he'd overheard. Rosa listened without interrupting, her dark eyes steady on his face. I've suspected for a long time that she was using you, she said when he finished. But I didn't want to overstep. You should have told me, Holden said, but there was no anger in his voice. Would you have believed me? She raised an eyebrow. You were determined to make that marriage work no matter what. I was a fool. No, you were hopeful. Rosa reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. There's a difference. So what now? You file for divorce, move out. Holden shook his head. Not yet. I need to be smart about this. She's been using me for years, using my income, my credit, my home. If I just walk out, she wins again. What are you thinking? I need to secure my finances first. Make sure she can't touch anything once I'm gone. He leaned forward. I need to document everything, any financial abuse, any fraud. I'm pretty sure she's been using my credit cards without permission. Rosa nodded slowly. You need legal advice. Eventually. But first, I need a plan. Holden met her eyes. I need somewhere to move money where she can't find it or access it. I have a friend at First National. Rosa said after a moment he could help you set up an account she wouldn't know about. That would be a start. What else? I'm going to sell my woodworking equipment, the good stuff in the garage. She doesn't even know exists. If worth a few thousand at least. Rosa has studied him. You love that equipment. I can buy more later. Right now. I need liquid assets. She can't track. Holden, Rosa's voice softened. Are you sure about this? It sounds like you're planning more than just a divorce. I'm planning start over, he said firmly on my terms. But I need to make sure she doesn't see it coming. Rosa was silent for a moment, then nodded. My cousin works in IT security. He helps people disappear their digital footprints, sometimes for domestic violence cases. Usually, but she shrugged. Your situation qualifies in my book. I'd appreciate the introduction. I'll set up Rosa. Check her watch. I need to get back. She stood then hesitated. Be careful. Holden. Marla won't take this well when she realizes what you're doing. That's why she won't know until it's too late. Holden's voice was calm, determined. I've spent 5 years being patient and understanding. Now I'll use that patience for something that matters: getting free. 2 weeks later, Holden pulled into the driveway after his shift. He'd already moved $4,000 into the new account. Rosa's friend had helped him set up his woodworking equipment. The lathe, the router table, the specialty tools he'd collected over years were now sold. The cash stashed where Marla would never look. He entered the house, pasting on the same weary expression he'd worn for years. Inside, though, he felt different. Purposeful. Each day was another step toward freedom. Marla sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced up. There's no food. I'll go shopping later. Holden hung his jacket on the hook by the door. Don't bother. I'm meeting friends for lunch. She looked up. I need $300 for the water bill and Zane's school fees. Holden didn't flinch. 2 months ago he would have handed over the money without question. Now he knew better. I paid the water bill online yesterday, he said mildly. What school fees? Marla's eyes narrowed slightly. The band trip. He told you about it last week. Zane hadn't mentioned any band trip, but Holden just nodded. Right? I'll get cash on my way to work tonight. Just give me your card. I'll stop at the ATM. It said its limit this week with a mortgage payment. He kept his tone neutral, reasonable. I'll get cash from my paycheck. A flash of annoyance crossed her face, quickly masked. Fine. But I need it by this afternoon. I'll make it work. Holden turned toward the stairs. I need sleep. Wait. Marla's voice shifted, taking on the silky quality she used when she wanted something. Clyde called yesterday. He's back in town. Holden paused. Your ex Zane's father. She corrected as if Holden needed the reminder. He wants to see Zane this weekend. Take him fishing or something. And I told him it was fine. She studied her manicure. He might stop by tonight to say hello. Be civil, will you? The real Marla showed through in that moment, the manipulative woman who enjoyed creating discomfort. She'd intentionally invited her ex to their home. Knowing how it would make Holden feel. 2 months ago, he would have been hurt, angry. Now he saw the move for what it was: another attempt to wound him, to establish dominance. Sure, he agreed easily. I'll say hello before my shift. Surprise flickered across her face. You don't mind? Why would I? He's Zane's father. Holden shrugged. I'm going to sleep now. As he climbed the stairs, he felt her watching him, puzzled by his lack of reaction. Good. Let her wonder. Let her think she'd stop getting to him. It would make his eventual departure all the more shocking that I in the bedroom. He locked the door before sliding a hand beneath the mattress. The stack of cash from his equipment sales was still there, $3,500. He counted out $300, tucking it into an envelope. He'd give it to her, knowing full well there was no band trip. The money was the price of maintaining his facade and worth every penny. Later that afternoon, Jed called. "How's it going?" his friend asked without preamble. Moving forward, Holden kept his voice low, though he was alone in the house. "Sold most of the equipment, setting up separate accounts." "Good." Jed paused. "You seem different at work." "Calmer." "I am calmer. For the first time in years I can see the way out. Just be careful. People get nervous when they feel control slipping away." Holden thought about Marla's surprise at his reaction to Clyde's visit. She started to notice something's different, that I'm not reacting the way I used to stay the course. Jed advised how much longer, maybe another month. I need to gather more evidence, secure more funds. And then I disappear. Holden smiled grimly, just watching the clock. Grace Quinn's Toyota pulled up to the diner on the edge of town at exactly noon. Holden watched from his booth as she scanned the restaurant. Her expression guarded. When she spotted him, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Physically, she resembled Marla, the same blonde hair. The same delicate features, but where Marla's eyes held calculation, Grace's showed weariness. She approached his table hesitantly. "Thanks for meeting me," Holden said, standing briefly as she slid into the booth. "I was surprised by your call." Grace didn't remove her jacket. "Marla doesn't know I'm here." "I assume not." Holden pushed a menu toward her. "Lunch is on me." Grace studied him, suspicion evident. "What's this about, Holden? In 5 years, you've never asked to meet me alone. I need your help," he said simply. She raised an eyebrow. "With what?" "Understanding what I'm dealing with." He met her eyes. "You grew up with Marla. You know her better than anyone." Grace's laugh was short, bitter. "Not sure that's a compliment." "It wasn't meant to be." He leaned forward. "I'm planning to leave her." The statement hung between them. Grace's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "Why tell me?" "We're not exactly close." "Because I think you see her clearly. And I think you might want to help make sure she doesn't win this time." The waitress approached and they ordered quickly 2 coffees, a BLT for him, a salad for Grace. When they were alone again, Grace leaned forward. "What makes you think I'd work against my own sister?" Holden considered his words carefully. "The way she talks about you, the way she dismisses you, the fact that at family gatherings you always sit as far from her as possible." Grace's mouth tightened. "We have a complicated relationship. She uses people," Holden said flatly, "including you." "What do you want from me, Holden?" "Information. Context." He stirred his coffee slowly. "Ways to make sure that when I leave, she can't twist things to make herself a victim." Grace was silent for a long moment. "She'll try. It's what she does. Our whole lives, she's been the princess and I've been the servant. When things go wrong, it's someone else's fault. When she hurts people, she finds a way to make it seem justified." Like with Clyde, a shadow crossed Grace's face. Exactly like with Clyde. She cheated on him, then somehow convinced everyone he was the villain. That's her specialty, rewriting history. Their food arrived and they ate in silence for a few minutes. Finally, Grace set down her fork. "I'll help you," she said quietly. "Not because I want to hurt my sister, but because I'm tired of watching her hurt others." Holden nodded. "I appreciate that. What do you need to know?" "Everything. Who she really is. What she's capable of." He paused. "And anything you know about the family finances when she was married to Clyde." Grace's smile was sad. "We might need more than a lunch break for all that." Over the next hour, Grace painted a picture of Marla that confirmed everything Holden had come to suspect. The manipulation, the lies, the sense of entitlement. How she'd maxed out Clyde's credit cards before leaving him. How she turned Zane against his father with subtle, poisonous comments. "She'll do the same to you," Grace warned. "Already has with Zane." "I know." Holden's voice was grim. "That's why I need to be prepared." As they finished their meals, Grace hesitated. "There's something else you should know. She's been talking to Clyde again, not just about Zane." "I'm aware," Holden said. "He's been to the house." "It's more than that." Grace looked uncomfortable. I think they're planning something." She mentioned getting the house in her name only. Holden nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me. Be careful," Grace said, gathering her purse. "She's not just manipulative. She's vindictive. If she thinks you're planning to leave, she won't know until it's too late." Holden assured her and Grace, "This conversation never happened." "What conversation?" Grace's smile was sad, but determined. "I was having lunch alone." Holden slid the small voice recorder into his pocket as he heard the front door open. From the living room couch, he had a clear view of the entryway where Marla now stood with Clyde. Clyde Brixby hadn't changed much in the years since Holden had last seen him, still handsome in that superficial way that aged poorly, still carrying himself with unearned confidence. He had Zane's dark hair and easy smile. But where Zane's attitude stemmed from teenage angst, Clyde came from a lifetime of charm, getting him out of responsibilities. Clyde nodded, his smile too broad. Good to see you, man. Clyde. Holden stood, offering a handshake. Marla mentioned you'd be stopping by. Yeah, wanna catch up with a boy before a fishing trip. Clyde glanced around. Is he here? Upstairs, Marla said, her hand lingering on Clyde's arm a bit too long. I'll get him. She disappeared up the stairs, leaving the two men alone. Nice place you've got, Clyde said, hands in his pockets. Marla says you've done well for yourself. It's comfortable. Holden gestured to the couch. Have a seat. Clyde settled on the armchair, looking around with barely disguised assessment. Factory work treating you okay? It pays the bills. Holden watched him carefully, the recorder capturing every word. How about you? Marla mentioned you've been traveling. Here and there. Had some business opportunities come up out west. Clyde's vague answer matched what Grace had told Holden. The man never held a job for long. Always chasing some new scheme. Good for you. A moment of awkward silence settled between them. Then Clyde leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, I appreciate you looking after Zane all these years. Boy needs a male influence. He's a good kid. Holden lied smoothly. Smart. Gets that from his mother, Clyde chuckled. The looks too, thank God. Footsteps on the stairs announced Marla and Zane's return. The boy's face lit up when he saw his father, an expression Holden had never seen directed at himself. That Zane rushed forward, accepting Clyde's backslapping hug. There's my boy. Clyde held him at arm's length. You've grown another inch since Christmas. 2 inches. Zane corrected proudly. Mom says I'll be taller than you soon. Bet on it. Clyde winked at Marla, who smiled back with a warmth Holden hadn't seen in years, if ever. I gotta head to work, Holden said, standing. The recorder continued to capture the interaction in his pocket. On a Saturday, Clyde raised an eyebrow. Night shift, Holden explained, we're running 7 days with a new contract. Tough break, Clyde said with false sympathy. It pays the bills, Holden repeated, gathering his keys. Marla followed him to the door while Clyde and Zane began discussing their fishing plans. You'll be late tomorrow, she asked, her voice just above a whisper. Probably equipment maintenance is scheduled. She nodded, already turning back toward the living room. Then we won't wait up. Holden walked to his truck, the weight of the recorder heavy in his pocket. It wasn't the first recording he'd made, and it wouldn't be the last. Over the past few weeks, he documented a dozen conversations, Marla on the phone, discussing his income as if it were hers alone. Marla instructing Zane to ask Holden for money they didn't need. Marla admitting to a friend that she'd use Holden's credit card for a spa day without telling him in his truck before starting the engine. Holden checked the small camera he'd hidden on a bookshelf in the living room. The feed came through clearly on his phone. Marla, Clyde, and Zane laughing together on the couch like a perfect family portrait. He wouldn't review the footage until later, but he knew what he'd find: more evidence, more ammunition, everything he needed to ensure that when he finally made his move, Marla would have no way to paint herself as the victim. Later that night, during his break at the factory, Holden sat alone in his truck reviewing the day's recordings. He fast-forwarded through most of it: Clyde's fishing stories, Zane's teenage boasting, until he reached a segment from after he'd left for work. Got to admit, the guy's consistent, Clyde was saying, always working, always paying. That's about all he's good for. Marla's voice came through clearly. But I'm getting tired of the arrangement. What are you thinking? Clyde's voice dropped lower. I'm thinking it's time for a change. Marla sounded calculating. The house is nearly paid off. Another year, maybe less. Is your name on the D? Both of ours. Pause. For now. Clyde's interest was palpable. You thinking what I'm thinking depends. Are you thinking I should get the house solely in my name before making any changes? Exactly that. Beautiful. Clyde chuckled. You get the house, then we figure out how to suggest Holden might be happier elsewhere. I need help with that part. That's what I'm here for. Clyde's voice lowered further. You think he'd go quietly? Accept the rearrangement. Holden, Marla laughed. He's a doormat. Has been since day one. He'll do whatever I tell him is best. Holden stopped the recording. A cold calm settling over him. There was the proof of what he'd suspected. They were planning to push him out to take the house he'd nearly paid off to continue using him until they didn't need him anymore. Well, they'd soon learn how wrong they were about him being a doormat. He'd check his watch. One more month of gathering evidence, securing his finances, finalizing his plan. Then he'd show them exactly who Holden Reese really was. The morning light filtered through the bedroom curtains as Marla rolled over, reaching for Holden's side of the bed. Her hand met cold sheets. She opened her eyes frowning. Holden, she sat up, squinting at the clock. 7:15 a.m. He should have been home from his shift over an hour ago. She grabbed her phone, checking for messages. Nothing. Irritation flared as she dialed his number. The call went straight to voicemail. "Where are you?" She muttered, sliding out of bed. Maybe he'd fallen asleep on the couch again. But the living room was empty, the couch undisturbed. The kitchen too showed no signs of his return, no coffee in the pot, no lunch container in the sink. His work boots, normally lined up by the door, were missing. That Marla's irritation gave way to confusion. Holden was predictable, pathetically so. He never deviated from his routine. She called the factory. "Midwest Steel, how can I direct your call?" A bored voice answered. "This is Marla Reese, Holden Reese's wife. Is he still there?" "He hasn't come home." "Let me check." A pause. "Ma'am, Mr. Reese called him last night. Said he had a family emergency." "What?" "No, that's not right. We don't have any emergency." "That's what he reported, ma'am. He's taken personal time." Marla hung up, her mind racing. What games are you playing? This wasn't like him at all. She called his phone again. Voicemail. She sent a text. "Where are you? Call me now." "Upstairs." Zane emerged from his room, hair tousled from sleep. "Where's the coffee?" He mumbled. "Your stepfather didn't come home," Marla said, still staring at her phone. Zane shrugged. "So maybe he finally grew a spine and left." "Don't be ridiculous." But a seed of concern took root. Marla marched to their bedroom, flinging open the closet door. Holden's clothes still hung on his side. His shoes lined up below. His wallet and keys weren't on the dresser, but he'd have those with him. The bathroom appeared untouched. His razor and toothbrush in the usual places. Nothing seemed missing. That Marla's phone buzzed, and she snatched it up. A text from an unknown number. "Taking some time away. Don't try to contact me." "What the hell?" she hissed, immediately calling the number. It went straight to voicemail, not even Holden's voice, just the automated system. She stormed back downstairs. He sent a text saying he's taking time away. What does that even mean? Zane, pouring cereal, barely looked up. "Told you he left." He wouldn't dare. But doubt crept in. Holden had been different lately, less reactive, more distant. She attributed it to extra shifts, to tiredness. "What about the mortgage payment?" She suddenly remembered. "It's due tomorrow." Zane rolled his eyes. "Check the account." Marla grabbed her laptop, pulling up their joint checking account. Her breath caught. The balance was far lower than it should have been. The regular transfers from Holden's paycheck, the ones that covered the mortgage, the utilities, the credit cards, were missing. "This isn't right," she muttered, clicking through to their savings account, empty. "No, no, no," Marla whispered, panic rising. She checked their credit card accounts. All carried balances near their limits. And no payment had been made this month. "Mom," Zane's voice held an edge of concern now. "What's going on?" "Nothing." She snapped the laptop shut. "Your stepfather is being dramatic. He'll be back." But he wasn't back that night. Or the next. His phone remained off, the unknown number no longer in service. At the factory, they would only say he'd taken personal leave. That be why the third day. Marla was furious. She called Grace, demanding information. "Why would I know where your husband is?" Grace sounded genuinely puzzled. "Because you two have always had this weird friendship thing. He tells you stuff." "He doesn't tell me anything, Marla. We barely talk." "Well, he's gone. And he's emptied our accounts." A pause. "What do you mean, empty?" "Exactly what I said. The mortgage is due. The power bill is overdue. And there's no money. Don't you have your own income?" Grace's voice held a note Marla couldn't quite identify. "From the boutique that barely covers groceries. Holden handles the big bills. Maybe you should try handling them yourself for once." The call ended badly, with Marla hurling insults and Grace hanging up. Days turned into weeks. Holden didn't return. The mortgage company sent a notice. The power company threatened to disconnect service. Zane's school called about unpaid lunch fees. Marla called Clyde in desperation. "I need help," she admitted. "Holden's gone. And we're drowning here. What do you want me to do about it?" Clyde sounded distant, uninterested. I thought maybe you could help financially just until I figure things out." His laugh was cold. "Sweetheart, I can barely keep myself afloat. Besides, isn't this what you wanted? Holden out of the picture. Not like this. Not with no money and no warning. Sounds like he learned something from you after all." Clyde remarked dryly. "Listen, I've got to go. Business meeting. I'll call Zane later." But he didn't call. Not that day or the next. By the end of the month, Marla couldn't reach him either. That Zane's grades slipped. He started skipping school. His attitude worse than ever. When Marla confronted him, he exploded. "This is your fault," he shouted. "You treated him like garbage and now he's gone. At least he paid the bills." "Don't you dare take his side," Marla hissed. "He abandoned us." "Like Dad abandoned us? Or what did you drive him away to?" The words sound like a slap. Marla watched her son storm out of the house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows that night. Alone in the too large house, Marla stared at the pile of bills on the kitchen table. Final notices, disconnection warnings, late fees mounting. The careful life she'd constructed was crumbling around her. Holden had walked away, taking everything with him: his paycheck, his reliability, his quiet presence that she'd taken for granted. And in doing so, he'd revealed just how precarious her position really was. 2 months after his disappearance, Marla sat across from a bank manager, trying to explain why the mortgage hadn't been paid. "I understand your husband left, Mrs. Reese, but the account is in both your names. You're equally responsible for the payments." "I know that," she said through gritted teeth. "I'm asking for an extension." "This will be your third extension." The manager's expression was skeptical. "Without some type of payment, I'm afraid we'll have to begin foreclosure proceedings." Outside the bank, Marla leaned against her car, fighting back tears of frustration. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grace. "We need to talk. It's about Holden." Marla paced the living room. Phone pressed her ear. "This must be a mistake," she insisted. "I've never opened accounts with Crestview Financial. Mrs. Reese, we have applications with your signature and social security number." The debt collector replied flatly. "The accounts are delinquent by 90 days. If payment arrangements aren't made, this will be reported to credit bureaus." "Check again," Marla demanded. "This isn't my debt. The primary account holder is Holden Reese. You're listed as an authorized user on documentation dated last year." Marla froze. "Holden opened these accounts?" "No, ma'am. The accounts were opened under your name with Mr. Reese listed as a secondary. The signatures match our records from your joint accounts." "That's impossible. I never signed anything." "Mrs. Reese, the outstanding balance is $12,380. How would you like to proceed?" Marla ended the call, hands shaking. This was the third such call this week. Debts she knew nothing about. Accounts she'd never opened. But her name was on everything. Her signature supposedly on the documents. The doorbell rang, startling her. Through the peephole, she saw Sheriff Lane Capel standing on her porch, his weathered face set in its usual stern lines. "Lane," she opened the door, attempting a smile. "What brings you by official business, Marla?" He removed his hat. "Mind if I come in?" She stepped aside, anxiety churning. "Is something wrong?" "Got some questions." Lane remained standing, declining her gesture toward the couch. "About your financial dealings." "My financial dealings?" She forced to laugh. "That's hardly police business." "Fraud is police business." Lane's eyes were cold. "Got a tip about some unusual activity. Credit accounts opened with potentially forged signatures." "Identity theft. I just got calls about accounts I didn't open." Marla said quickly, "If anyone's a victim of fraud, it's me." "Interesting you say that." Lane pulled out a small notebook. "Because the tips suggested you were the one committing the fraud, not your husband." "That's ridiculous. Holden abandoned us months ago. Left us with nothing." "That what happened?" Lane raised an eyebrow. "Because the evidence I'm gathering tells a different story." "What evidence?" Marla's voice rose. "What are you talking about?" "Credit applications with signatures that don't quite match your normal handwriting. Accounts opened in time periods when your husband was at work, but you weren't. Surveillance footage from banks and stores." Lane flipped his notebook closed. "Just the tip of the iceberg, I suspect. You can't seriously believe I would do something like that. Wouldn't be the first time, would it?" Lane's voice hardened. Remember when you worked at the dental office? Before you married Holden? That insurance fraud investigation was buried. But I haven't forgotten. Marla paled. That was a misunderstanding. Nothing was ever proven. Maybe. Maybe not. Lane put his hat back on. I'll be back with more questions. And Marla? Don't leave town. As the door closed behind him, Marla sank onto the couch, her mind racing. How had this happened? How had her carefully controlled life spiraled so completely out of control? Her phone rang again. Zane School. Mrs. Reese? This is Principal Davis. There's been an incident involving Zane. We need you to come in immediately. By the time Marla arrived at the school, Zane was slouched in a chair outside the principal's office, a defiance set to his jaw despite the bloody knuckles and split lip. What happened? She demanded. Mr. Quinn Reese was caught vandalizing the gymnasium. Principal Davis replied, emerging from his office, spray paint on the newly renovated walls. When confronted, he became violent with the custodian who discovered him. I didn't touch that guy. Zane muttered. He grabbed me first. Zane, hush. Marla turned to the principal. There must be some mistake. Zane wouldn't do something like this. We have him on security footage, Mrs. Reese. And this isn't his first incident. His grades have plummeted. His attendance is spotty at best. And now this Davis's expression was grave. I'm afraid we have no choice but to suspend him pending a disciplinary hearing, a hearing for some graffiti for assault, destruction of property, and a pattern of increasingly concerning behavior. Davis handed her a folder. The hearing is scheduled for next week. I suggest you both take this very seriously. Expulsion is on the table. In the car, Marla exploded. What were you thinking? Do you know what I'm dealing with right now? The last thing I need is trouble from you. Like I care what you need. Zane spat. You've ruined everything. Dad left because of you. Holden left because of you. Everyone leaves because you're toxic. Don't you dare talk to me that way. Marla gripped the steering wheel tighter. I've sacrificed everything for you. You've sacrificed nothing. Zane stared out the window. You use people, then act surprised when they've had enough. Where's this coming from? Who's been filling your head with these lies? Grace, show me the texts. Zane's voice was cold. The ones where you talk about Holden like he's nothing. Where you plan to take his house once it's paid off. Grace had no right. She had every right. Zane unbuckled his seat belt as they pulled into the driveway. At least she tells the truth. He slammed out of the car, storming into the house. Marla followed, fury building. Grace, she called, dialing her sister's number. How dare you interfere with my son? He deserves to know who his mother really is. Grace replied calmly, I'm done covering for you. Marla, covering for me? You've been undermining me. No, I've been watching you destroy everyone around you. And I've finally had enough. Grace's voice hardened. Did you know I'm in contact with Holden? Marla froze. What? He reached out weeks ago. Shared some interesting information. Like what? Marla's mouth went dry. Like recordings of you planning to force him out of his own house. Like evidence of financial fraud. Like the real reason Clyde originally left. You're lying. Am I? Asked yourself why Sheriff Lane came knocking. Why the creditors are calling. Why Zane is finally seeing through you. Grace sighed. It's over, Marla. The house of cards is falling. You've always been jealous of me, Marla hissed. Always wanted what I had. What you had. Grace laughed bitterly. A life built on manipulation and lies. No thank you. I've got something better. The truth. And soon everyone else will have it too. The call ended, leaving Marla staring at her phone in disbelief. Upstairs, she could hear Zane slamming things in his room. Outside, another notice had been taped to the door of the power company. Final warning before disconnection. Everything was unraveling faster than she could contain it. And somewhere out there, Holden was watching it all happen. Sheriff Lane Capel spread the documents across his desk, shaking his head as he examined them. This is more thorough than most detective work I've seen. Across from him, Jed nodded, just doing my civic duty, reporting suspicious activity. And you came by this information, how exactly? Lane raised an eyebrow, anonymous source. Jed's face revealed nothing. Someone concerned about potential financial crimes. The sheriff studied the surveillance footage again. Marla at an ATM withdrawing money from an account that wasn't hers. Marla at a department store opening a credit line with a signature that didn't match her own on file. Funny thing. Lane said, "I've been waiting for Holden Reese to file a complaint, but he hasn't. These documents came from somewhere, though. Maybe he doesn't know the extent of it," Jed suggested. "Maybe he just left a bad situation and someone else connected the dots." Lane's phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then hung up. That was the forensic accountant. Preliminary findings show at least $15,000 diverted from Holden's accounts over the past year. Not to mention credit lines opened in his name without proper authorization. Sounds serious. Serious enough for charges. Lane gathered the documents. "Your anonymous source did quite a job building this case." Jed stood adjusting his cap. Justice works in mysterious ways. Sheriff, as Jed left the station, he pulled out his phone. "It's done." He texted to a number he knew belonged to Holden. "Lane has everything." The response came a minute later. "Time for phase 2. Tell Rosa across town." Rosa Linney sat at her living room with a manila envelope on her lap. Holden had entrusted it to her over a month ago with specific instructions on when to deliver it. Today was the day. She drove to the sheriff's office, the envelope secure beside her. Inside were bank statements, credit card receipts, and a detailed accounting of how Holden's income had been systematically drained over the past 5 years. Most damning of all was the documentation showing how Marla had opened lines of credit in Holden's name using his financial information without consent. "I'd like to speak with Sheriff Capel," she told the deputy at the front desk. "It's about the Reese fraud investigation." Minutes later, she sat across from Lane. The envelope's contents spread between them. "Holden gave you these?" Lane asked. Rosa nodded before he left. "He said he couldn't stay, but he wanted the truth to come out." "And where is he now?" "Safe." Rosa met his eyes steadily away from her. Lane's side, rubbing his forehead. "This is quite a case you're all building. First Jed with the surveillance footage. Now you with the financial records. We care about Holden." Rosa said simply, "He didn't deserve what she did to him." "No, he didn't." Lane gathered the documents, adding them to the growing file. "With this I have enough for a warrant. Financial fraud, identity theft, credit card fraud. What happens now?" "Now," Lane stood. "Now I pay Marla Reese another visit. This time with handcuffs." The county courthouse stood solid and imposing against the clear blue sky. Holden straightened his tie as he climbed the steps. Rosa beside him. Inside, they joined Jed, who was waiting in a lobby. "You ready for this?" Jed asked, clapping him on the shoulder. Holden nodded, calm and collected. More than ready. It had been 3 months since he disappeared. 3 months of careful planning, of building his case, of starting over. The wood shop he'd leased on the edge of town was already turning a modest profit. The small apartment above it was sparse, but comfortable. Most importantly, it was his. "She's already inside," Rosa murmured with her attorney. "She looks terrible." "She should," Jed muttered. "Fraud charges tend to take a toll." Holden said nothing. He wasn't here for revenge or to gloat. He was here for justice and for closure. They entered the courtroom. Marla sat at the defendant's table. Her normally perfect appearance noticeably diminished. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back severely, wearing clothes that had once fit better. She turned as Holden walked in, her eyes widening. For a moment, their gazes locked. Holden felt nothing, not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just a profound sense of freedom. He nodded once, then took a seat on the other side of the courtroom. The judge entered and the proceedings began. Financial records were presented. Evidence of systematic fraud laid out in clinical detail. Holden listened as the prosecutor described how Marla had abused his trust, his credit, his income, using him while planning to discard him. When it was his turn to testify, Holden approached the stand with steady steps. He was sworn in, his voice clear as he recited the oath. "Mr. Reese," the prosecutor began, "can you describe when you first became aware of the financial improprieties?" "I suspected something was wrong about 6 months ago," Holden answered calmly. "Bills seemed higher than they should have been. Accounts were depleted faster than our spending could explain." "And what actions did you take?" "Initially, I tried to discuss it with my wife. She dismissed my concerns." Holden's voice remained even. "So I began documenting discrepancies, tracking expenses, reviewing statements more carefully." "What did you discover?" "Credit cards I never applied for. Cash withdrawals I hadn't made. Purchases I knew nothing about." He paused. "And conversations about how to remove me from the house deed once it was paid off." Marla's attorney stood. Objection. Hearsay, Your Honor, we have audio recordings of these conversations. The prosecutor countered. I'll allow it, the judge ruled. Continue, Mr. Reese. Holden detailed the evidence he gathered, the pattern of deception he'd uncovered. He spoke without emotion, stating only facts. Why did you leave without notice? The prosecutor asked. I feared for my financial security and mental well-being. Holden replied. Once I understood the extent of the fraud, I knew I needed to protect myself legally before confronting the situation. No further questions. Marla's attorney approached, his expression calculating. Mr. Reese, isn't it true that you abandoned your family without warning? Left them without financial support. I left the situation where I was being exploited. Holden corrected. And the financial support I provided for years was being systematically abused and misappropriated. But you made no provisions for your stepson's welfare. My stepson isn't his mother's custody. She is employed and capable of supporting him, as she often reminded me. Holden met the attorney's gaze. Additionally, the accounts I maintained solely for his education and medical expenses remain untouched and accessible to him when he turns 18. The questions continued, attempting to paint Holden as cold, calculating, vengeful. But he remained composed, answering truthfully and directly. When he stepped down from the witness stand, he caught Rose's encouraging smile. Beside her, Jed nodded in approval. The judge called a recess and Holden stepped into the hallway for air. Sheriff Lane approached, his expression thoughtful. Quite a case you built. Lane said, you did good keeping your hands clean. I just wanted the truth to come out. Holden replied, truth has a way of finding daylight eventually. Lane studied him. You planning to stay in town? I am. Start a business. Custom woodworking. Good for you. Lane glanced back toward the courtroom. She'll likely face probation, restitution payments. Could have been worse if you'd pushed for maximum charges. That wasn't my goal. Holden said quietly, I just wanted what was rightfully mine and for her to understand their consequences to using people. Lane nodded, understanding in his eyes. Lesson learned. I'd say late afternoon sun slanted through the courthouse windows as the judge delivered her ruling. Holden sat straight back to his chair, Rose's hand resting supportively on his arm. In the matter of financial restitution, the judge declared, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff Holden Reese. All fraudulently obtained funds must be repaid in full. Additionally, Mr. Reese is granted full ownership of the property at 1482 Maple Street, with Mrs. Quinn Reese relinquishing all claims. Marla's sharp intake of breath was audible across the courtroom. She turned, searching for Holden's eyes. Her expression a mixture of shock and fury. The judge continued, regarding the criminal charges of fraud and identity theft. This court accepts the plea agreement. The defendant will serve 2 years probation, complete 200 hours of community service, and make full financial restitution as determined by the court auditor. The gavel fell, signaling the end of the proceedings. Around him, people began to stand to gather belongings. Holden remained seated for a moment, letting the finality wash over him. It's over. Rosa murmured beside him, you won. Not about winning. Holden replied softly, about setting things right. They stood, preparing to leave. As they turned toward the door, Grace approached tentatively. Holden, she said, voice low. Could I speak with you for a moment? Rosa squeezed his arm. I'll wait outside. When they were alone, Grace spoke. I wanted to apologize for not saying something sooner, for letting it go on as long as it did. You had your own complicated relationship with her, Holden acknowledged. I understand that. Still, Grace glanced toward her sister, who was arguing intensely with her attorney across the room. No one deserved what she did to you. How's Zane? Holden asked, genuine concern in his voice despite everything. Struggling. Grace sighed. The expulsion hearing didn't go well. He's been assigned to an alternative school for the remainder of the year. Holden nodded. If he ever needs anything. I know, Grace managed a small smile. You're a good man, Holden. I hope someday he realizes that. In the hallway, Jed waited with Rosa. He slapped Holden on the back as they walked out together. Told you let it burn and rebuild from the ashes. Holden added, stepping into the sunlight. Yes, they descended the courthouse steps. He spotted Marla near the parking lot, standing alone. For a moment, he considered walking past without acknowledgement, but something made him pause. Give me a minute. He told Rosa and Jed that he approached Marla, stopping several feet away. Up close, the strain of recent months showed clearly on her face. "So that's it?" she asked bitterly. "You take everything and walk away?" "I took back what was mine," Holden corrected. "What you try to steal. We could have worked something out. If you just talked to me like you talked to me." He raised an eyebrow. "While you plotted with Clyde. While you mocked me to your sister. While you taught your son to disrespect me." She had no answer for that. "I'm not here to argue." Marla Holden's voice softened. "Not with affection, but with finality. The divorce papers will be delivered to you tomorrow. I've arranged for you to have 30 days to find new housing. You're throwing me out on the street. I'm giving you time to make arrangements," he corrected, "which is more consideration than you plan to show me." You turned to leave, then paused. "Where's Clyde now? Still helping you plan your future?" The flash of pain across her face was answer enough. Clyde had disappeared again, as Holden had known he would. "Goodbye, Marla." He walked away without looking back, rejoining Rosa in Jed. "Everything okay?" Rosa asked. "Yes," Holden said and meant it. "Everything is exactly as it should be." 6 months later, Holden stood in his workshop examining a cherrywood dining table he'd just finished. The craftsmanship was flawless, smooth edges, perfect joints, a finish that highlighted the natural beauty of the wood. Pride swelled in his chest, not just for the work, but for the life he'd built. The bell above the shop door jingled. Jed walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee, delivery from Gina's. He announced, setting 1 cup on Holden's workbench. "Rosa said you've been here since dawn. Customers picking this table up tomorrow." Holden accepted the coffee, gratefully, want to make sure everything was perfect. Jed circled the table, whistling appreciatively. "Piece of art, man. How's the business doing?" "Good. Better than expected." Holden sipped his coffee, got orders booked through spring. After leaving Marla, Holden had used some of his recovered funds to lease the workshop space. Custom furniture had always been his passion, but under Marla's roof it had been relegated to a hobby. Now it was his livelihood, and a successful one at that. "Rosa stopping by later?" Jed asked, a knowing smirk playing at his lips. "We're having dinner." Holden tried to sound casual, but couldn't stop the smile that tugged at his mouth. "About damn time." Jed muttered, "Woman's been carrying a torch for you since high school. According to her, we're taking it slow." But the warmth in Holden's voice revealed more than his words. "Town still talking about the court case?" Jed said, changing subject. "People saying it's about time someone stood up to Marla Quinn. I didn't do it for the town gossip. I know that, but it's satisfying anyway. Isn't it?" Holden's smile was answer enough. The shop door opened again. Grace stood in the entrance, looking hesitant. "Is this a bad time?" she asked. "Not at all." Holden gestured her in. "Just finished up for the day." Jed checked his watch. "I should get going. Laura's expecting me home for dinner." He clapped Holden on the shoulder. "Don't work too late. Some things are more important than perfect table legs." After Jed left, Grace approached the table, running her fingers along the polished surface. "This is beautiful. Thank you." Holden wiped his hands on a shop towel. "What brings you, bot?" "I got a letter," Grace said, "from Zane. He asked me to give you this." She held out an envelope. Holden took it, turning it over in his hands. Zane's messy handwriting spelled out his name on the front. "He's doing better," Grace continued. "The alternative school has smaller classes, more individual attention. His counselor says he's working through a lot of anger." "Good." Holden set the unopened letter on his workbench. "He's a smart kid. Just needs the right guidance. You've been asking about what really happened. And what did you tell him?" "The truth." Grace met his eyes. "That you were good to them, even when they weren't good to you. That his mother made choices that hurt everyone around her." Holden nodded, grateful for her honesty. "Marla's still staying with you. For now, she's got a job at the grocery store." Grace's smile was sad. "Quite a change from the boutique. Life has a way of resetting our expectations," Holden observed. After Grace left, Holden picked up the letter again. He held it for a long moment, remembering the boy who had rejected every attempt at connection, who had parroted his mother's contempt. Then he walked to the shop's potbelly stove, opened the door, and dropped the letter inside. The paper curled and blackened in the flames. Whatever apologies or explanations it contained didn't matter now. That chapter was closed. Later that evening, Rosa found him sitting on the small porch of his apartment above the shop, watching the sunset. She settled into the chair beside him. Comfortable in the silence they often shared. Beautiful, she said, gazing at the golden light spilling across the town. It is. But Holden was looking at her, not the sunset. Rosa caught his gaze, a smile playing at her lips. Grace stopped by the clinic, said she'd given you Zane's letter. She did. Did you read it? Holden shook his head, burned it. Rosa's eyebrows rose in surprise. Why? Some bridges can't be rebuilt. He said simply. Some wounds don't need to be reopened. She studied him for a moment. Do you regret any of it? The marriage? The years with them? Holden considered the question. Watching as the last rays of sunlight painted the clouds and shades of pink and gold. The life he'd built now, this workshop, this home, this woman beside him, was everything the old life wasn't. Honest, reciprocal, peaceful. Only that I didn't leave sooner. He answered. Rosa's hand found his fingers intertwining. Around them, dusk settled like a gentle blanket. Ahead, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. New light, new possibilities. Holden squeezed her hand, the last remnants of his old life falling away like ashes in the wind. The past was finished. This moment, this future was just beginning.